Hey guys, it's Chris Wong. I'm filming this video as of March 17th, 2025, and I'd like to talk about changes I'm going to be making investing with margin. So as a disclaimer, I'm not a financial advisor. I'm just a guy interested in building a portfolio. So this is based on all the mistakes I made in the last couple of weeks. It's based on all the margin calls I did receive, and with the stock market going down in the last couple of weeks. So in the last couple of weeks when I tried to settle margin calls in Questrade, I tried to sell them by contributing money into my Questrade TFSA because my Questrade TFSA provides my buying power available for my margin account. And then I also kept trying to purchase shares in the Canadian ETFs just because I want to add some more Canadian ETFs into my Questrade TFSA and then try to limit the amount of USD ETFs in my margin account or even in my Questrade TFSA. And then I still got margin call because when I do buy in the Questrade TFSA and is linked to my margin account for buying power, I still lose buying power available. So if I get a margin call for $100 and I contribute $100 to my Questrade TFSA for just $100, then my buying power just goes down to zero for the day. So I would have to actually sell some shares in my Questrade margin account in order to get my buying power back in my Questrade TFSA. So when I actually sell some shares at loss on Questrade margin and purchase in my Questrade TFSA, stock market went down further, margin call again. So at the same time, I was trying to build my Questrade TFSA by contributing money from my work or whatever money was left in my bank account, and I nearly drain my bank account until my next paycheck just to try to sell margin calls without selling any shares in my margin account. I actually ended up having to sell some shares at a loss in my Questrade margin account just to meet the margin call. And then I also did try to move around some funds, so I actually decided to reduce holdings of certain funds and try to increase holdings of other funds as well. So in the previous video, I talked about how I purchased shares of SQY, AIYY, AMDY, Coney, and even like other single stock yield max ETFs like TSMY as well. And then I end up selling a lot of the single stock ETFs just to settle margin calls. And I actually did feel more comfortable with weekly paying ETFs like YMAX, YMAG, QQQY, QDTE. So around the same time, I started using a Wealthsimple margin account, and I was actually using Wealthsimple margin account to purchase more Canadian ETFs, like the Harvest version of MSTY, and even purchase a few shares of their leverage version, MSTE, and even the Coney of Harvest. And I did purchase the Yield Max MSTY because of the margin requirement for MSTY on Wealthsimple compared to Questrade. I also started to like using Wealthsimple margin because the Wealthsimple margin interest rate is a lot lower than Questrade. I believe for Canadian, it's like 5% margin interest rate, and it's like 7.5% for USD. So I actually decided to make a plan to use more margin in Wealthsimple and less on Questrade. But I'm not fully phasing out of Questrade margin anytime soon, because if I were to close my Questrade margin account, I would actually sell funds at a loss. I originally opened my Questrade margin account with just 250 Canadian dollars, and then I actually started buying funds on margin with my Questrade TFSA as collateral. So I would say in the process of trying to learn about margin and to try to build my portfolio through margin, I would say I did get greedy up to a point. Like I tried to use VOO, SPY, and QQQ as a way to get 20% margin requirement because Questrade offered 20% margin requirement for those three funds. But when it comes to dividend investing, those three funds only pay dividends quarterly, and they don't pay high amounts of dividends. I think they're like less than 2% dividend yield. So that's not enough to pay down margin. But these three funds, they are really great. They are great for growth. They're great for long-term holding. But for my investment strategy of paying down margin, they don't work for me. But when I did try to use VOO as one of my main anchors for my portfolio for margin, I got access to a lot more buying power. And with the market going down, so I had to sell shares at loss if I don't have enough money in my bank account to cover it. And also because I decided that I actually want to get out of VOO and move to HYLD.U because it's the same index, but HYLD.U gives me monthly dividends at like a 12% dividend yield. I actually prefer to have that for dividends. I prefer to have that for the margin requirement because I want to go back to 30%. With 20% margin requirement, I realized I had to actually sell 5 times the amount of shares, or I had to sell 5 times the amount of money of the margin call in order to settle it. But if it was 30%, then I only have to sell about 3.33 times the amount. I would say from this experience, from what I'm actually seeing and learning about margin calls, I actually find that when I had to sell some shares at a loss, it's not just that I'm losing money temporarily. I'll get the money back in dividends long term. It's also, as of right now, because I have to sell shares at a loss, the dividend income I get in my margin account is going to be less. But because of selling shares at a loss, the negative cash balance is still quite high. So when I'm charged margin interest, the margin interest is based on the negative cash balance only, not based on the equity value. So one of the dangers of using too much margin relative to your account is if you have to sell at a loss and your dividend income goes down because you have less shares of funds that pay you monthly income or weekly income, and if your margin interest rate didn't go down as much because you sold some shares, the actual net effect for the month between your actual dividend income minus your margin interest rate for the month is going to be even smaller too. So I actually decided going forward for now in my Questrade margin account that I'm not going to be purchasing any more shares on margin, and I'm not going to sell unless I have to settle a margin call. So whatever balance it is right now, I'm just going to think of it as either a student loan to pay off, a car to pay off, a house to pay off, or even a small loan from the bank that I just have to focus on paying it off. So whether it takes me a year, 2 years, 3 years, or even 5 years, I just want the margin account in Questrade to be fully paid off. And then I look at it as after it's fully paid off, I will actually have a paid off portfolio giving me weekly or monthly income for the rest of my life. So in the beginning, I may consider adding my work income into my margin account. So I won't be contributing into my Questrade TFSA to add buying power. I may consider just putting into my Questrade margin account, and I have to think about whether I want to just convert into USD because most of my Questrade margin is in USD. And then in the long term, as the negative balance gets closer to zero, then the margin interest amount charged for the month, it's going to get smaller over time. And then once the margin account is paid off, then there'll be no margin interest. I was actually hoping for a bigger amount in my margin account and then just let it pay off by itself. But it is what it is. So I would just get a smaller amount because I had to sell some shares at a loss because the stock market went down. So I'll just accept what it is and just let the account pay itself off with the dividends. And at the beginning, I'll add my income from work in order to try to pay it down faster. I hope you guys liked the video. If you liked the video, please give me a thumbs up. Otherwise, please subscribe to my channel for future videos. Thank you guys for watching.